Para dar comienzo al evento, cedo la palabra al comisionado Alejandro Falla, quien será nuestro moderador en este panel sobre tendencias regionales en materia de competencia. De contar con tiempo, podremos hacer preguntas a los panelistas, por lo que solicitamos nos las hagan llegar por escrito a nuestros compañeros en la sala. Muchas gracias.
Welcome, everybody.
Buenos días.
Of course, I want to begin by thanking our speakers for being
Nuestros ponentes por estar aquí con nosotros esta mañana.
top session in any conference in the world. And this is happening in Mexico City at COFECE, so we are very thrilled. Thank you very much. This will be an enlightening discussion, which is highly relevant given the direction competition policy is taking in many jurisdictions, the tendency towards more concentrated markets, and the challenges that always come with certain political pressures, and that is the case of Mexico, of course. Our speakers do not need any presentation, so I will just briefly make some highlights about your positions and careers. And I will start with Lina Khan. She's chair.
Khan, ella es presidente de la Comisión Federal de Comercio desde 2021. Anteriormente, Lina era muy conocida y, una estudiante de Derecho sumamente provocativa. Ella fue a la Escuela de Derecho de Yale y fue directora legal en el Instituto Open Market. Bienvenida a Ciudad de México, Lina. Jonathan es fiscal general adjunto de la División Antimonopolio de la División del Departamento de Justicia. Es un abogado practicante en Washington, D.C., y él es el encargado de la creación de una boutique que se dedica a la prevención de monopolios. Jonathan y Lina han sido pilares en la modernización del sistema antimonopolio estadounidense, lo cual, en mi opinión, sienta un precedente judicial que es sumamente enriquecedor y ortodoxo, que nos permite llevar a cabo acciones adecuadas. Entonces ellos traen a la mesa ideas sumamente interesantes. Matthew fue designado comisionado de la Oficina de Competencia de Canadá en 2019 y fue reasignado por
an outstanding career at the Bureau, leading numerous merger reviews and investigations targeting criminal cartels, abuse of dominance practices, and deceptive marketing practices as well. Before joining the Bureau, he worked at the Ontario Secretary.
Desde ello, él trabajó en la Comisión de Antimonopolios de Ontario como fiscal adjunto en Toronto, donde se encargó de litigar en el aspecto criminal. Andrea es la presidenta de la Comisión Federal de Competencia Económica y la persona a quien tenemos que agradecerle por tener estos maravillosos ponentes, por traerlos esta mañana. También tiene una carrera extraordinaria en la Agencia de Competencia Económica y se encuentra implementando proyectos e iniciativas que van de la mano con darle relevancia a la perspectiva antimonopolio y hacerla más efectiva. Voy a hablar ahora cómo va a funcionar este sistema. Vamos a tener una primera sesión que debería...
Can extend a little bit longer, just a little bit. And in this first round, the idea is that our speakers discuss the importance of vigorous competition policy for national economies and share tendencies and trends regarding cooperation and enforcement. Many things are happening in North America. As some of you may know, just last month, the DOJ and the FTC jointly issued a revised version of the merger guidelines. This triggered a lot of discussion within the antitrust community, not only in the U.S., but also in the world. And they are adapting this instrument to reflect modern realities, and it is aimed at encouraging more competitive and open and fair markets. That's a very interesting initiative. And as you also may know, there are also major cases being prosecuted against big techs This would be unthinkable just a few years ago. Canada has recently gone through an important overhaul and reforms of its competition law and competition regime, and I hope you can also talk a little bit about these changes. Mexico, we've been developing successfully a competition policy over the last 30 years, but there is recently a discourse, a political discourse that is questioning the value these COFECE is bringing to society. So Andrea has also a lot to say about this situation. We face problems and challenges that require further and innovative cooperation. It comes to my mind the initiative launched last year between our three countries to detect collusive behavior seeking to exploit the FIFA World Cup in 2026. I think that there is more things to do when it comes to cooperation. A general questions for all the speakers, and we will start with Lina, followed by Jonathan, Matthew, and we will end the session, this first panel, with Andrea. From your perspective, why does competition policy matter, and why is it important to intervene through neutral, specialized, autonomous agencies? The question is a little bit broad, but of course you can touch upon the elements and the features that you consider more relevant, highlighting trends and challenges from your own jurisdiction. Lina, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's so great to be here. Thanks so much to COFECE for bringing us together. We have such an important and close working relationship, and really appreciate everything COFECE has been doing under Andrea's bold and really important leadership. Also, so glad to be here with Matthew. Our partnership as well is just absolutely essential, and we've been really cheering from the sidelines as we see Canada implement a really important set of reforms under Matthew's leadership. And of course, the Associate Attorney General and the FTC work very closely together in the United States. So zooming out, in the United States, we've had a national policy in favor of competition going back more than a century. And we've done so because, lawmakers decided in a very key way that markets that are organized around competition, when companies are having to compete through a process of rivalry, that produces outcomes that are better for the public than a market that is controlled by a monopoly, right? And I think our experience in the United States over the last century has shown that to be true over and over again. And so we've seen how competition is essential to make sure that Americans have access to affordable, high-quality products. And we've seen, unfortunately, all too often how inadequate competition can lead to a whole set of harms. And under President Biden, the United States has been reinvigorating our approach to antitrust and competition and making sure that we are protecting the American public from abuses of monopoly power and anti-competitive practices. I'll just share a few examples across our work that I think really illustrate the importance of competition across the board. And so we have a whole set of cases right now that are focused on healthcare markets. Unfortunately, all too often we see inadequate competition in healthcare markets. In the United States, Americans end up paying more for healthcare than citizens around the world, be it for medicine, be it for healthcare and hospitals. And so we have a very active program right now to promote more competition, make sure that we are taking on the high prices of drugs. All too often we see that people are having to ration or skip life-saving medicine, including for things like insulin. So we have a major program underway to make sure that companies across healthcare markets are not able to abuse their market power in ways that's driving up prices or that's depriving the market of more innovative drugs, more innovative options. We're also very focused on food and agriculture markets. We brought a case a couple of years ago going after practices by dominant firms in the pesticide market. So we found that huge pesticide giants, Syngenta and Corteva, had been engaging in anti-competitive practices in ways that was depriving farmers of access to lower-cost pesticides. They ended up then overpaying by millions and millions of dollars, and as a result, the food-paying public ended up paying extra millions and millions of dollars. So we have a case ongoing designed to make sure that farmers have more options and that consumers ultimately are not paying these, monopoly taxes baked into the price of food. More generally, we've also been looking to make sure that we are enforcing the antitrust laws in a way that protects everybody. That means protecting consumers, but it also means protecting workers. And so we've been very focused on looking at labor markets. One signature initiative that we have underway is going after non-compete clauses. So these are contractual provisions that employers would put in their contracts with workers that will limit who else those workers can go and work for. So it prohibits them from going to work for a rival. We've brought cases finding that, security guards who make close to minimum wage were unable to go get a better paying job with better opportunities because of these non-compete clauses. We've also now proposed a rule that would eliminate non-competes across the economy, which we estimate would raise wages collectively by around $300 billion. So this is real money back in the pockets of working people. More generally, there's now just a wealth of research that shows that when there is less competition for people's labor, how much that they get paid goes down. We also know that at a very basic level, people have less opportunity and less liberty. Your employer is able to impose more coercive terms when they know that you don't have as many options. And so we just see a wealth of benefits that stems from competition across the board. I'll just say big picture, I think the last few years have also highlighted that at a more macro level, monopoly and inadequate competition can have devastating consequences. And so we all saw during the pandemic that instances in which we had concentrated production also ended up concentrating risk. And so we ended up with markets, we ended up with supply chains that were much more fragile. And so a single shock in the system could have cascading effects. In the United States, a couple of years ago, we had a shortage of infant formula that ended up affecting the whole country, in part because there was a single outbreak in a single factory of a single company. And so we've seen how there are real resiliency implications. We've also in the United States seen how there can be national security implications. There's a big conversation going on in the national security establishment about the importance of competition for our national security. And so across the board, we're just really focused on making sure that we're fighting for the American public and that promoting fair and open and competitive markets is absolutely a key pillar.
You give us 5 minutes more for further discussion. Jonathan.
Please, thank you very much. It's. Let me just reiterate. It's so wonderful to be here. Looking out and seeing all of you is really an inspiration. COFECE, and I just want to thank Andrea and COFECE for the warm welcome, for hosting us. Mexico has established itself as a world leader on the competition stage. These are global issues that affect our global economies, and it requires, true inspirational leadership, vision, and prioritization. And the world has come to appreciate the importance of Mexico, not only for the role that it plays in protecting competition in its domestic economy, but the role that Mexico plays in helping to preserve and promote competitive opportunity on the global stage. And it has generated a tremendous amount of respect for COFECE and a tremendous amount of respect for the work that the Mexican government is doing. And so we are extremely grateful. It also hopefully will be evident from our conversation today that as North American antitrust enforcers, we work together extremely well. And that's absolutely critical. We have a shared vision and a shared mission, which is to make sure that we are promoting competition democracy, opportunity in our respective economies, and that requires close collaboration. And I will say, as a personal note, a close working relationship. And I can look across today at all of my colleagues here and know that they are not just strong enforcers and brilliant minds, but wonderful people who care deeply about doing the right thing. And so all of you up here, I just want to express my thanks and gratitude. I'm really pleased with the question that we're starting with, because one of the things that we've tried to do is go back to first principles and ask the question, why do we care? Why does this all matter? And I want to highlight a few aspects of our mission that I think really, for me, resonate very foundational and very fundamental levels. First is competition and democracy go hand in hand. It's a bold statement, but it's true. The fact of the matter is choice, opportunity, self-determination, those are all corners of democracy. The deconcentration of power is an essential ingredient to ensuring that we have a thriving society where people, at the end of the day, have the greatest say in their own government, in their own economy, and in their own lives. Competition means opportunity. It means opportunity to start a business, whether that's an entrepreneur in Mexico or an established incumbent in the United States, or a vigorous innovator in Canada. Good ideas should lead to great opportunities. Great ideas should lead to even better opportunities. And innovative ideas and an innovative spirit, which I think is something we share across our economies, should lead to a sky that is the limit. And that is the kind of opportunity we want to promote. But it's not just that. It's the opportunity to work where you want to work. It's the opportunity to get better wages because there are more job opportunities and more companies competing for labor. It's an opportunity to build communities and the businesses and the infrastructure that allows those communities to thrive and have their needs met. These are essential elements. They don't work without a thriving, competitive economy. And that's where competition and antitrust enforcement is so essential. We make sure those opportunities become available. We make sure that citizens have the opportunity to sustain the lives that they choose for themselves, no matter where they live. And that shouldn't just apply to big cities like this one, which is so miraculous and impressive, but it also should apply to rural communities and smaller villages where thriving businesses are possible and important. There's another dimension too, though, which is the importance of competition and antitrust enforcement with respect to corruption. Big part of what we do, and we do this together, is making sure that we are addressing corruption in the procurement of contracts, whether they're private contracts or government contracts. These are real significant issues. I'm just thrilled to partner North America as part of the upcoming World Cup in an essential initiative that will help make sure that we are addressing corruption and fraud and abuse in the context of procurement in our relative jurisdictions in such an important social and economic endeavor. Finally, I will say that a lot of our concepts are being tested right now by changes in the economy. If you think about the way the world looks today, it's so different than the way it looked 30 years ago, let alone 15 years ago. The digital economy has transformed market realities, how we conduct business, where we conduct business. What we value has changed. Sometimes products are standard and they have a price. Sometimes we pay with our privacy. Sometimes we pay with our data. Information is distributed not just through newspapers, but they're distributed through the digital economy in ways that leave us vulnerable to misinformation. And the advent of AI, artificial intelligence, has generated new challenges that will certainly keep us all busy for the foreseeable future. I think those tests are healthy. I think they will force us to go back to our first principles, understand why we care about these issues in the first place, and make sure that we are building frameworks that will allow us to do that. And our meetings as enforcers in North America is exactly how we do that. We get together and we talk about these issues and we learn from each other, and we make sure that we have the opportunity to adjust to these changes, restore our confidence in our first principles, and ensure that we are keeping our eye focused on preserving a thriving, competitive economy so that we can preserve thriving and competitive democracies.
Thank you, Jonathan. Maybe after the first round, we can touch upon some specific cases and issues that have been challenging in the U.S. jurisdiction. Matthew, can you give us, please, the Canadian approach?
Gracias, Commissioner Falla. Buenos días a todos. Es un gran placer estar aquí con ustedes esta mañana. Muchas gracias a COFECE por organizar este evento. Good morning. Thank you all. That's it.
That's it.
I'm incredibly pleased to be here in Mexico City with my colleagues, in COFECE, Chairwoman Andrea Marban, the U.S. Department of Justice, and the Federal Trade Commission, and also with our IFT colleagues, Commissioner Juarez here in the front row. I also have to say that it's incredibly nice to have a brief break from the depths of Canada's winter. We checked the weather forecast, and later today, the difference between the temperature here and in Ottawa will be 37 degrees Celsius difference. So this is really nice. This is like summer for me. I also want to echo Jonathan's comments that COFECE is a leader in the region and internationally. This includes our important and shared work on the theme of making competition more inclusive and impactful so that, as Lena said, our work benefits everyone in society. COFECE is truly a valued partner in our efforts in this regard. Now, coming back to your question, Commissioner Falla, your question is a really important one, particularly now. Why does competition matter? Why do independent competition agencies matter? And I'll give you the Canadian perspective on this. Make no mistake, and this is sort of competition 101, but healthy, fair, vigorous competition is a key pillar of all three of our economies. It is vital. Promoting and protecting competition in the public interest is why we in Canada go to work every day. It is why we bring difficult cases to prevent or fix harm to competition that impacts our citizens and the economy. It is why we study flawed markets impacting our daily lives and recommend pro-competitive solutions to address those issues. It is why we advocate for pro-competitive, smarter regulations and policies that don't hinder competition across the economy. And it is why we collaborate with our domestic and our international partners like we are doing today. We do all these things to secure the many benefits that competition provides to our economies. And we're having a positive impact across all the jurisdictions. In Canada, we're seeing tremendous progress with our enforcement work, but also with making the public and the politicians realize the incredible value of competition. In fact, just on Sunday night or Monday morning, the Minister of Industry in Canada said that 2024 would be all about competition. So it is Canadians are keenly aware of the issues. So as I share my thoughts and experiences today, I'm doing so against the backdrop of what I'll call Canada's competition moment. Because it hasn't always been the case where competition has been a top issue in our country, and that is an unfortunate reality of our history. We have never before seen such a focus on competition law, policy, and enforcement in Canada. From the government, as I've said, from various decision makers, from the media, and from citizens, the most important group that we must pay attention to. This is, of course, happening alongside a number of factors in Canada, including incredibly high inflation, tremendous economic uncertainty, and growing market power in sectors of the economy that are most important to Canadians. And unfortunately, these issues are often impacting the most vulnerable Canadians the most. I'm sure everyone has heard before, the competition creates all sorts of tremendous benefits, lower prices, better products, more choice, more innovation, more productivity in your economy, which drives your GDP growth, which allows your quality of living to stay at a level or increase. It has so many dividends. But competition, as I said, is also about the future. It's about our children and our grandchildren. And this is something that really resonates with me when I go about my daily work. I think about my two daughters and what kind of economy they're going to inherit from our generation. And competition is a key factor on that. Because when we do not nurture and prioritize the central role of competition in our economy, we all feel it. Like the examples are many in Canada. We feel it when we're at the grocery store, when we're paying our wireless bill, when we're at the gas pump, when we're negotiating a mortgage. It impacts everybody's life all day, every day. That's how important it is. And I mentioned a moment ago that competition concerns are receiving unprecedented attention in Canada. And there's a sad reason for that, is because competitive intensity in our economy has been on a downward slide for decades. We know this because the Bureau recently completed a study of competitive intensity in Canada from 2000 to 2020. Our findings that have not been challenged since they were put out months ago show that competition is on the decline, and it has been for some time. Industries that already had the highest levels of concentration only saw more concentration over that period of time. Top firms are less and less challenged. Fewer firms entered existing industries, and profits and markups went up. Why? I would say because historically, and we'll talk about it today, in Canada, we've had very weak merger laws for decades. Other parts of our laws have not been in line with international best practices. We have many regulatory barriers to competition across our economy. And for a long time, we had a significantly underfunded competition agency. Clearly, we have challenges in Canada and we need to act urgently. We are focusing our work on the sectors of our economy that matter the most to Canadians.
Canada.
And as Canada's competition watchdog, we are an independent law enforcement agency. And that is crucial, in my view. We make evidence-based decisions based on economic evidence, based on evidence we gather from parties, based on what we can see going on in markets. There is no political influence in our work, our enforcement work, or even our advocacy work. We apply the law as it stands, and we do so fearlessly. even though it might not be a popular topic for us to take on, for us to attack, we do it because we're independent, and that's incredibly important. We're using every tool we have to crack down on anti-competitive practices that have the greatest impact on Canadians' lives. Of course, we do all the things that our colleagues here do, so I won't go through it in detail. But how well we do this work depends on a lot of things. Includes an effective law, because the law determines what we can do. We need the right people with the right skills, and that's something that all of us talk about. How do we get the right people with the right skills at this stage in the digital economy in 2024 to attack the tremendous challenges that we see? We need enough resources to do this work to the standards that are required, and we need to do our work independently for the benefit of our citizens. So, fortunately, in the last 3 years, our government has decided to take action on all these fronts, to increase our budget and to amend our laws, and I'll talk about that perhaps a bit more, Commissioner Faya. So I realize I'm probably over time. Am I over time? I'm going to cut it short. So those are sort of why I think your question is so important, why competition is so important, and I'm echoing the comments of Lena and Jonathan in that regard, but why, an independent agency in Canada is vital. And I saw the independent issue come up in our parliament just before the holidays in late 2023, where there were some proposed changes to our law and potentially giving the minister more power to direct the Bureau to do things. And our politicians were very concerned about that because they value the independence of the Competition Bureau in Canada. So we'll continue working closely with our international counterparts. And that is because in 2024, to a great extent, business is global, and the effort to protect and promote competition must be global as well. So thank you for giving the opportunity to speak with you, and it's great to be here in Mexico.
Con ustedes y
Thank you very much for your message. And we were astonished by your Spanish and your attempt to start.
Parle français, alors si
took some lessons before coming to Mexico City, I suppose. And you mentioned the independence element, and it comes to my mind when we were in the negotiation of the competition chapter of the MEC, and we were including specific provisions about national authorities and due process and collaboration. The three delegations had in mind the institutional model that has been implemented through the last 30 years in the case of Mexico, much longer in the case of Ghana and the U.S. And that was a very clear and solid understanding, the importance that the competition authority has to be designed specifically with certain attributes so it can implement effectively competition policy. And that is one of the main objectives of this chapter, the enforcement, the effective enforcement of competition policy for the benefit of societies and consumers. So that's a very important issue. Last but not least, our chair, Andrea, please, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you. I would first like to thank our very special guests who are here today with us. It is an honor to have you here. Thank you. And also, I would like to thank our teams and our international staff for months of planning in order to make this possible. Now, given that statement, I will switch to Spanish, and I will answer in Spanish. I think Matthew doesn't need a translator. Maybe somebody else does.
Google Translate.
Muchas gracias y bienvenidos a todos y a todas. La política de competencia ha demostrado cómo puede ser un motor para reactivar la economía en el país, para combatir fenómenos que dañan la calidad de vida de los ciudadanos, para brindarles más y mejores opciones de bienes y servicios.
Everything okay? Oh, no, it sounds good.
El Banco Mundial ha señalado que los países con economías más competitivas tienden a tener mayores ingresos para su población y a su vez que estos países pueden llegar a tener menores tasas de pobreza. Por su parte, organizaciones como la Organización para la Cooperación y Desarrollo Económico señaló que la existencia de mercados competitivos contribuye a un entorno inflacionario bajo a largo plazo, porque ayuda a reducir los efectos de los altos precios en mercados competitivos. En México llevamos durante ya varios años implementando una política de competencia en la que, con casos reales y muy relevantes, que ha logrado que esta autoridad de competencia tenga una verdadera capacidad de incidencia en la población. Les voy a compartir algunos ejemplos, pero desde que la COFECE fue creada en 2013, hemos perseguido, como nunca antes, empresas que manipulan precios o abusan de su poder de mercado, y lo podemos poner en números muy sencillos. En 2011 y 2012, las multas anuales de la entonces Comisión de Competencia rondaban en los 131 millones de pesos. Tan solo en 2022 impusimos multas y sanciones que ascendieron a 4,000 millones de pesos. Y además sanciones que no solo se tradujeron en multas, sino en la imposición o presentación de querellas penales en contra de las personas físicas que participaron en acuerdos ilegales, y también en sanciones de inhabilitación a personas físicas para poder laborar o ejercer cargos directivos en empresas por haber actuado en representación de estas empresas, cometiendo violaciones a la ley. Estos casos no me voy a detener mucho, pero sí me gustaría resaltar que son mercados en los que se tiene una de alto impacto o de alta incidencia en el bienestar de la población mexicana. Y también mercados que implican insumos necesarios y que al momento de combatir problemas en competencia, eso evita que se paguen sobreprecios en estos insumos. Me gustaría mencionar dos casos en particular. Uno es el autotransporte terrestre de pasajeros. En nuestro país, el principal medio de transporte para la población es el autotransporte terrestre de pasajeros, no es el avión. Y hace poco, la COFECE sancionó a 18 empresas, incluyendo las empresas más grandes y más importantes del país que prestan este servicio, por coludirse para manipular el precio de los boletos y repartirse las rutas en las cuales prestaban su servicio por más de 10 años. For over 10 years. ¿Sí? Recalcando esto, como les decía, de acuerdo con datos oficiales, el 75% de la población mexicana utiliza el autotransporte terrestre como su principal medio de transporte, siendo además un rubro en el que los mexicanos destinan una importante parte de sus ingresos. Considerando lo anterior, se impuso una multa de 1,200 millones de pesos, que es la segunda más alta en la historia. Y además se inhabilitaron a varias personas físicas para ejercer cargos en estas empresas. La actuación de COFECE, como en este ejemplo, fue clave para evitar que muchos mexicanos y mexicanas pagaran sobreprecios o continuaran pagando sobreprecios para poderse transportar de un lado al otro. Hay otro caso que tiene un enfoque distinto, y este es un caso reciente que resolvimos el año pasado, relacionado con sistemas de pago con tarjeta. En este caso, la Comisión, tras una revisión sumamente exhaustiva y técnica, encontró que dado la manera en la que operan ciertas partes a lo largo del sistema de pagos con tarjeta, existían problemas de competencia importantes. ¿Y en qué se traducen esos problemas de competencia? En que las comisiones pagadas entre los bancos por la operación de este sistema de pago en nuestro país es de 1.36%, mientras que en países europeos es cercano al 0.2%. Es decir, que estas barreras contribuyen
a que en México se paguen comisiones 6 veces más altas que en otras partes del mundo. Y esto a su vez genera un efecto sistémico, porque no imposibilita, pero dificulta que los pequeños comercios no acepten el pago con tarjeta porque les resulta muy costoso. Y por lo tanto lleva a que la población no la utilice. Tiene un impacto directo en la inclusión financiera y en la bancarización y en la formalización de la economía mexicana. México sigue siendo uno de los países donde un porcentaje considerable de la población prefiere usar el efectivo. ¿Por qué? Porque es el medio de pago que se acepta en los establecimientos a los que frecuenta. A raíz de lo que encontramos, la Comisión emitió recomendaciones para los reguladores, con quien hemos trabajado muy de la mano y se han mostrado muy interesados en implementar cambios para eliminar estas barreras, para hacer varios ajustes al marco normativo, asegurar que queden claras las reglas para poder ingresar al sistema de pagos, que quienes definan las reglas no sean los que operan ya en estos sistemas de pago, sino que sea un regulador imparcial y así sea más fácil el acceso a este mercado, el cual puede, insisto, se traducirá en beneficios directos a la formalización de la economía mexicana. Estos casos no hubieran sido posibles sin un estudio y sin una labor de investigación y de análisis técnica y robusta y exhaustiva por parte de la autoridad de competencia. Ahora, al igual que cualquier otra política pública, como todas las instituciones, creo que estamos en un momento clave, como lo llevo diciendo desde que fui nombrada comisionada presidenta en marzo del año pasado, en el cual la política de competencia debe conocer la realidad, adaptarse a la realidad y evolucionar conforme al contexto social y económico de cada país. Y poniéndolo en contexto de nuestra economía y de nuestro país, como yo ya lo mencionaba, las personas en situación de pobreza son los más afectados por la existencia de sobreprecios. En México, estudios muestran que los hogares de menores ingresos pierden en promedio el 15% de sus ingresos debido al poder de mercado. Revertir esta situación me parece que nos hace corresponsables a las autoridades de los 3 órganos de gobierno en todos los niveles y en todos los sectores, así como a nosotros como protectores de la política de competencia en nuestro país. Por esta razón y la situación que existe en nuestro país, hay un esfuerzo sistémico por parte de los gobiernos y de los legisladores para combatir la pobreza y mejorar la calidad de vida de las personas, ya sea con el fortalecimiento de los salarios, dando apoyos de manera directa o fortaleciendo otras políticas sociales. En el marco de estos esfuerzos, la COFECE y la política de competencia estamos adaptando un rol cada vez más activo para conseguir que los resultados que nosotros damos en nuestros casos y en nuestros procedimientos beneficien en mayor medida a la población, que los resultados de la autoridad de competencia den respuestas a las demandas muy válidas y puntuales de la población. Nuestras actuaciones, y como lo he dicho desde hace varios meses, deben orientarse con toda determinación a evitar el pago de sobreprecios, ayudar a cerrar brechas de género, porque la política de competencia también puede incidir en cerrar la brecha de género, a generar mejores condiciones laborales para las y las trabajadoras. La Comisión ha sido, y es algo que hemos discutido con nuestros pares, ha sido punta de lanza en casos de competencia que afectan mercados laborales. Y esto es un tema crucial porque la competencia en los mercados laborales ayuda a mejorar las condiciones laborales de los trabajadores, a que tengan mejores salarios y mayores oportunidades. Y también en cómo la competencia puede dar oportunidad a que las pequeñas empresas puedan entrar a los mercados y competir en ellos. Hoy, las agencias de competencia de México y de todo el mundo estamos haciendo un ejercicio de evaluación, inclusive autorreflexivo, para determinar cómo la política de competencia se puede acercar más a la población y cómo puede ayudar a construir una economía más justa e incluyente. Hoy en día estamos haciendo un esfuerzo exhaustivo tanto las autoridades de competencia en el mundo y especialmente la Comisión, para fortalecer el impacto que puede tener la política en competencia e impulsar en nuestro país una mayor competencia en sectores clave para la economía nacional y que esto se traduzca en beneficios tangibles para la población. Y en este contexto es donde hemos decidido desde hace varios meses abrir una nueva fase de la política de competencia y por lo que nos da mucho gusto intercambiar experiencias con Nina, con Jonathan y con Matthew, quienes hemos renovado esfuerzos y revitalizado la aplicación de la política de competencia y quienes lo han hecho y claramente lo han hecho, como lo han manifestado el día de hoy, en sus países. Con ello, creo que solamente reiterar que la cooperación internacional e institucional es fundamental para construir un frente común ante los desafíos que se tienen en todos los mercados y sobre todo en aquellos mercados que afectan a los sectores más vulnerables de la población. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, our three speakers. From your opening statements, we can conclude two things. One, the benefits of fair and vigorous competition are so clear. And the second would be that there is only one proven model that works effectively, and that is an agency that operates arm's length from the government and is able to take sound and non-biased decisions that are following and pursuing the public interest. But still, it seems that competition problems are greater than ever. It seems that our tools may not work in all contexts or may not be enough. That we have to redefine certain approaches and still strengthen the system to produce more meaningful results. So this second part of the discussion, I would prefer, and I would like to touch upon specific issues and specific challenges that may take us into a new direction so we can render visible benefits for society and consumers. If anyone from the audience has a question, please, you can write it down in a piece of paper and hand it over to Carolina. Okay? And getting
You already have a ton.
that. So thank you very much. I cannot assure that I will be able to read all this, but I will perform a screening process and select some of the questions, okay? So thank you very much. I mean, you can still send. Okay, that's the good one. Okay, I will reverse the order and start with Matthew. Okay? Can you take us through the legislative changes that just occurred in Canada? And for instance, in Mexico, when somebody talks about changing our competition law, we get really afraid because it might be an opportunity to do something for good, but it also kinds of open a Pandora box and things could get ruined. I mean, and that's always a risk. So what are the main changes? Which was the reason behind these changes, and how collaboration with the central government played out throughout the process? So that would be the first question, and I would appreciate our speakers to give to go straight to the answer and share with us the specific details regarding challenges and tricky issues in your jurisdictions. And I want to thank again the three of you for your really insightful statement. So we start with you, and you can speak in Spanish and English, whatever you prefer.
All right. Ready? No, French. Okay. French. Okay, thank you again, Commissioner Faya. So this is a story I do like to tell because it's positive coming out of Canada. As I said, in 2020, 2019, when I formally took on the job, it was clear to me, it was clear to my colleagues that our law was out of date. It wasn't aligned with international best practices. It wasn't aligned with our North American colleagues' laws, and it really wasn't fit for purpose. So, but the good news is, as I mentioned earlier, there have been many changes in the last 2 years, catching us up. I like to call it catching us up to the rest of the world. There are more proposed changes that our Parliament will start debating next week when they come back from their holidays. Let me tell you some of the changes that have already been made at a pretty high level. We have a new criminal offense prohibiting wage fixing and no-poach agreements between employers. When this issue sort of came on the radar initially with both Mexico and the United States, people were asking us in Canada, because of an issue during COVID, why we weren't going after it. And we sort of were very blunt with the public and the government. Our law got changed in 2009, and it means we can't go after it criminally. And, when there's a flare-up and you are very honest with the public and say we can't do anything, it helps drive change. A new formal framework under the Competition Act was just passed into law for market studies and giving the Bureau power to compel information when we do market studies. We were an outlier in the world without the power to compel. We had to rely on companies to voluntarily give us information, which you can imagine that doesn't always work so well when it's a touchy issue. We got rid of the efficiencies defense, which is a very bizarre, unique aspect of our merger review law that allowed clearly anti-competitive mergers to go ahead if the parties could show that the efficiencies outweigh the anti-competitive effects. So you could have a merger to monopoly if the corporations were going to realize a bunch of efficiencies from it. Absolutely bizarre. Our maximum penalties for abuse of dominance have been increased significantly. Our maximum penalties for other civil violations have been increased very dramatically. Our abuse of dominance law has been modified to streamline it. It hasn't gone as far as we'd like to see it to align us with the rest of the world, but it is progress from our perspective. So there are other changes, and there are more to come. In terms of how we did this work, let me say very bluntly, we did it openly. These weren't quiet conversations between us and the government in back channels. For years, during my time anyway, we've been very clear and direct with the public about the problems, with media about the problems, politicians, lawyers and businesses about the many flaws in our law. And we did it as prosecutors do. We did it with evidence. We always said, look, here's the way it works here. Here's the way it works in this country. Why are we so special? And ultimately, this caught the government's attention in 2022. They launched a wide-ranging consultation on the future of competition law and policy in Canada. And once again, our views were not a secret at that point. We'd already made them very clearly. I made them in speeches over and over, which was something the Bureau hadn't really done in our history. So we were transparent. We were like a dog on a bone, and we were blunt in our submission. So when the government did this consultation, we put in a submission, and we identified over 50 different areas of our law that needed change. And we were very, once again, prosecutorial about it. We said why, we said what the rest of the world did, and we put forward suggestions. So as a result of that, we've started to see these changes. And I think one thing I just want to flag before I stop talking is, and this is something that I know that colleagues around the world are all working on, we've taken an approach in the last few years of everything we communicate to the public, and in fact, everything we communicate internally, we try and put it into plain language. forgetting about the days of very technocratic, antitrust, cellophane fallacy, blah, blah, blah. We're bringing things down to what average Canadians can understand. And this we believe, has played a key role in driving the reform agenda in Canada, because we're bringing the problems to people's everyday life. And that's making people... There's a poll last summer or the summer before where 88% of Canadians said they believed that Canada needed much more competition in our economy. And that's, I think, part because the independent agency was speaking honestly to the public about the flaws and how they needed to be fixed. So it's a story I like to tell because we're on the right road. We still have a ways to go in Canada on our law, but we're making progress.
Muchos avances.
I'd like to go with you, Lida. Long before you became chair, you were writing a lot of stuff about digital markets, so you became like a rock star with a famous paper, and it was like a hurricane in the antitrust community. And you went to the FTC and managed to reflect a special interest of the agency regarding digital markets, adequate considering how certain platforms have grown and how they created a lot of competition concerns. But it was a sudden turn in the agenda, a very interesting one, and then the U.S. became on the spot because it started to pursue very relevant cases as the European Union did. Can you share with the audience some of the main challenges regarding this effort of the FTC address competition concerns with respect to digital platforms and big techs, and why is this so important, and how to balance the agenda of digital versus traditional markets that are still important for the U.S. economy. And we were just reading in the press, it's not that we are stalking you, that you were giving an interview in Silicon Valley and you talked to the tech community. Can you, if you can, talk to us about the concerns the tech community may express connection with these cases and with this agenda of the FTC? Thank you.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I will say big picture, every antitrust enforcer has the challenges of its moment. And a lot of the questions and challenges that we're now facing with these remarkable digital platforms, in some ways, echo the challenges that our predecessors were facing over a century ago with the railroads, right? The original foundational antitrust laws in the United States were created in part in response to the Industrial Revolution, which had delivered enormous technological progress, but had also concentrated control and power in the hands of very few. And so you had farmers who were suddenly able to ship their goods nationally, but they also found themselves often dependent on a single railroad. And they saw firsthand how that concentration of power over the key arteries of commerce, right, our key economic channels, could be ripe for abuse if you didn't have any checks on it. And so, farmers were very upset that, the railroads, and a very few number of them, was effectively picking winners and losers in the economy. And in many fundamental ways, those are the same concerns that we hear now in our digital markets, where you have, new arteries of commerce, and there's a lot of concern from entrepreneurs, from small businesses, that a handful of entities that are unchecked by competition are calling the shots in ways that what is winning and what is succeeding, they worry, is not a reflection of what customers or consumers like, but it all too often can be a reflection of the arbitrary whim of one with the existing giants. In many ways, we're hearing these concerns parallel some of the foundational concerns we had heard. Matthew talked about, the importance of democratizing our work and making sure we're explaining to people in plain language what our work is about, which has been absolutely an essential part of what we're doing at the FTC. But we've also been really keen to make sure we're opening our doors and hearing directly from people about their concerns. And so visits out to the Silicon Valley are part of that broader process. It was really interesting to sit down because I think sometimes, the tech community is described as a monolith, right? And what we see, in fact, is that oftentimes a lot of the startups and the innovators are the ones who are sharing these concerns with us, right? And I think historically in American history, we saw that the success of the existing incumbents was dependent on there being open, competitive, contestable markets, right? Going all the way back to AT&T, when our antitrust enforcers brought antitrust action, forced them to open up their patent vault. That catalyzed waves of innovation. Similarly, Jonathan's predecessors boldly took action against Microsoft. That ended up in turn opening up the market and creating the opportunity for today's incumbents to really enter the market and grow. And so what we want to make sure is that, again, today, these markets remain open, competitive, contestable, especially at these moments of technological inflection point that we now face with the expansion of artificial intelligence tools, incredible transformative technologies that have great potential to deliver great benefits. But we need to make sure that these moments are ones where competition has the opportunity to disrupt the existing market rather than a moment that existing incumbents are using to entrench their power, lock in their power, and close off the market to newcomers. Those were some of the concerns I heard directly from some of the startups and founders. They're investing a lot in some of these new technologies, but what they want to make sure is that these markets are open enough for them to succeed on the merits, and for their success to be based on whether customers and consumers like their products, not a factor of whether they're too threatening to one of the existing incumbents that can use their leverage to lock them out. So those are the concerns we heard. At the FTC, we've really been building up our technological capacity. So Office of Technologists, we had been talking to some of our international counterparts about their experience investing in some of these technological capacities, and they shared, it can be challenging to recruit. Public sector can't compete with private sector on salaries. But we were really thrilled. We got somewhere to the tune of 700 applicants just within a week. There's enormous interest right now in the technological community to come into government to make sure that the public enforcers are able to really look under the hood, understand how are these algorithms working, what's really going on here. And so being able to build up that office, be able to hire top-notch data engineers, data scientists, AI specialists has been really essential to boost that capacity. Of course, we are still under-resourced. The agency is still smaller than it was back in 1980. We've been grateful for additional resources from Congress, but that continues to be a pain point. Let's say the other challenge in the United States more generally can be the length of antitrust litigation, right? I think all too often we've seen that these cases from the day you file the lawsuit to getting the remedy, especially after you've gone through appeals, it can take years and years. And especially in some of these markets, you need action very quickly because the market is looking and watching. And if they see a monopolist abusing its power, locking out newcomers, that's going to start shaping investment very quickly. That's going to start tipping markets very quickly. And so I think that lag between the urgency and the importance of being able to act in a nimble and timely way, especially in these digital markets where you have feedback loops. And so, even a relatively brief period of monopolistic conduct can have huge long-term ramifications and lock-in dominance. The urgency of that, contrasted with just the length of some of our proceedings, I think continues to be something that we have to navigate.
The judiciary, I get there a lot of things, but also dysfunctionalities and certain problems, because in Mexico, if you allow me to make a follow-up question, many agencies have devoted a lot of resources to address concerns regarding platform development strategies, concentration, digital markets, abuse of dominance, externalities regarding the use and misuse of information. Is it time to be concerned as well with artificial intelligence?
Look, I think we're at such an important moment, right? I mean, I think we've all seen how the trajectory that technologies take is not preordained. It's not an inevitability. If you have rules of the road that are promoting open, fair, competitive markets, that can help lead these technologies on a trajectory that will best promote the public interest. By contrast, if you are hands-off and you allow the incumbents and the monopolies to exploit this moment, to dig in their moats, to lock in their dominance, that can have very harmful effects. And so I think we need to be extraordinarily vigilant. We've all, seen research and reports showing how some of the capabilities that the firms now have with AI creates a whole set of concerns, be it with regards to, algorithmic pricing and how that could be leading to an enabling implicit or tacit collusion. We've similarly seen concerns at the FTC about the ways in which some of these business models can also be incentivizing endless hoarding up of data that can also lead to privacy violations. We've all seen how, I think a decade ago, we saw how the existing incumbents were able to use acquisition strategies to, especially in these moments of vulnerability, buy up some of their rivals or buy out companies they worried could dislodge them from a different direction. And so I think we need to be extremely vigilant on all of those grounds, even if the precise tactics and the mechanisms today look slightly different. And so they might not be a direct replica of what happened last time around. But I think absolutely we also need to be extremely vigilant. And I'm really pleased that the FTC has already been investing in this area.
Andrea, for a statement, you mentioned that we enter into a new stage, competition policy in Mexico. What do you mean by that? And what specific initiatives and actions are you entering into this new stage and render more powerful outcomes?
Thank you. Creo que esta pregunta me parece muy relevante porque durante la Comisión de Competencia hace 30 años fue diseñada con un propósito muy claro, que fue garantizar la libertad de mercado, y me parece que ha hecho y ha cumplido con ese mandato de manera satisfactoria. Sin embargo, y regresando a lo que contestaba yo hace unos momentos, no solo en México, sino a nivel mundial, hay una conciencia en cuanto a que las autoridades de competencia y la política de competencia, además de garantizar el libre mercado, debe de generar acciones que se conviertan en beneficios tangibles para la población. ¿Y qué es lo que nos ha pasado no solo en México? Y Matthew lo mencionó muy bien. Las autoridades de competencia deben ser órganos sumamente técnicos, pero a veces nos quedamos en esa discusión técnica. Las autoridades de competencia, me parece, en un primer paso, tenemos una labor de, sin perder la parte técnica, lograr aterrizar de manera puntual por qué la competencia importa, por qué la competencia beneficia al país, y además de aterrizarlo, hacerlo con acciones concretas. Yo diría que me parece que son 3 pasos en esta nueva era de la política de competencia. 1, reconocer que debemos evolucionar, no regresar, evolucionar y avanzar hacia adelante, atendiendo a estas necesidades y a la realidad social y económica de nuestro país. En segundo lugar, con el marco legal que tenemos actualmente, ¿qué se puede hacer? Yo primero diría, hay que atender y tan solo revisar la cartera de investigaciones y de procedimientos que tenemos en curso. una facultad que se le dio a la Comisión hace 10 años, fue para no solo sancionar conductas, sino para determinar la existencia de barreras a la competencia. Si hoy vemos la cartera que lleva el titular de la autoridad investigadora, me parece que queda muy claro cómo la Comisión está investigando si existen problemas de competencia en sectores muy cercanos a la población y de relevancia. Las investigaciones que se tienen en curso son autotransporte de pasajeros, comercio electrónico, harina de maíz y la semana pasada o hace unos días se anunció también una investigación relacionada con autotransporte de carga en ferrocarriles. Entonces, primero, hay que ver los procedimientos y las investigaciones y, lo que tenemos en la panza. En segundo lugar, creo, dentro de estas acciones que nos permite el marco legal, y algo que llevo yo mencionando desde hace varios meses, es qué más podemos hacer con las facultades que ya tenemos. Si bien se nos dio la facultad para presentar querellas penales en contra de cárteles o acuerdos colusorios, no se ha logrado avanzar como se debería en esos casos. Entonces, ¿qué condiciones tienen que existir para que las querellas sean exitosas y quienes acuerden o participen en acuerdos colusorios sean acusados penalmente y tengan consecuencias penales? 2, una manera en la que la población se va a ver, reflejará y además será compensada de manera directa por violaciones a la ley de competencia cuando ellos son afectados, y ellos son los principales afectados, es el resarcimiento de daños y perjuicios. Me parece que ahí tenemos una deuda porque la Comisión tiene la facultad de ejercer acciones colectivas y es algo que por diferentes circunstancias y por muchas discusiones técnicas aún no se ha logrado y creo que debemos de avanzar hacia allá. Un tema que mencionaba Linas, y aterrizándolo más a nuestro país, las investigaciones en materia de competencia en México y en el mundo son muy tardadas. Puede ser por temas del proceso judicial, pero insisto, es una revisión muy técnica y muy exhaustiva en la que todos los hechos de la investigación tienen que estar soportados por evidencia, porque si no, esos hechos no van a pasar en el Poder Judicial. Y eso toma tiempo. Hay una facultad que no se ha explorado, que está en la ley, y que tenemos para dictar medidas cautelares en investigaciones. Esas medidas cautelares pueden ayudar a contener un daño irremediable en el mercado, como lo mencionaba Lina, y así dar el suficiente tiempo para que las autoridades de competencia ya realicen sus investigaciones y tengan hechos y evidencia técnica para soportar sus conclusiones. Además de estas, ejercicio de facultades legales, más allá, se ha hecho mucho, pero de manera más contundente. También es importante, y lo he dicho en varios foros, tener un diálogo constante con diferentes actores de la sociedad, con el sector público en sus 3 niveles de gobierno, con los legisladores, también con el sector académico y con el sector privado. Tener diálogo no resta autonomía, pero sí, durante estos meses hemos encontrado a través del diálogo muchos puntos en común en los que se puede impulsar que la política de competencia se vuelva parte de la agenda pública de este país. Un ejemplo rápido es la iniciativa que lanzamos de Competencia en tu estado, en la que nos hemos acercado a los gobiernos estatales y hemos encontrado puntos o agendas de trabajo concretas con ellos para crear conciencia en materia de política de competencia y su importancia. Ayudarlos y acompañarlos en cómo su regulación puede ser más procompetitiva. Y también ayudarlos a diseñar procesos de compras públicas que favorezcan la competencia, que se traduzca en ahorros para ellos y también que sepan cómo identificar una posible violación a la ley y qué hacer. Me parece que este es un buen punto de partida para la nueva era de política de competencia y en su momento creo es válido hacer una evaluación si para pasar de una autoridad protectora de la eficiencia de los mercados, además de eso, se pueda pasar a una autoridad contundente que combate o antimonopolios, pues es necesario hacer ciertos ajustes y eso creo que en su momento sería válido discutir. Muchas gracias. Ajustes a la ley, perdón.
And
Thank you.
Next. Mexico, it has been so hard to prosecute.
complicado.
For a lot of reasons, starting from a lack of understanding from both prosecuting authorities and judges, which calls for evidence, liability, and a lot of.
Que se tienen varios hombres de responsabilidad.
An authority like the DOJ performing such an essential function in the U.S., and I suppose it's hard for you as well
En Estados
to
Unidos,
prosecute criminals.
desde luego, es complicado.
But to build up an authority internally in terms of capacity, skills, and human resources. One question which is somehow related, and I think asking about Google to ask if you share some of your thoughts about the challenges involved prosecuting such as Google. If you think if the system is mature enough
Estos procesos judiciales, si crees que
or of panels like that.
Thank you. Yeah. So in terms of I'll start with the discussion of criminal antitrust prosecution, which is an extremely important. Yes, these cases are hard, but they should be. The standard for criminal prosecution is appropriately high, and we have the burden to convince our case juries that somebody's a company or an individual has engaged in violations of the law that necessitate criminal penalties, and in some instances for individuals, jail time. But these are very serious offenses. They often involve, talked a little bit about it today, corruption and fraud, often in many instances of government procurement of contracts. These are really important issues, and it's our burden, and we have to train ourselves to determine how we can investigate these matters in a timely way, to determine how we can present these issues to a court and a jury in a way that's understandable and that reflects the seriousness of what it is the wrongdoing has resulted in and the harms. So it's a combination, but we're thinking, very proactively and in a very forward-looking way about the kinds of challenges we confront. So, for example, we're thinking about data and artificial intelligence and how this affects collusion and how it affects, in many instances, makes it easier to implement cartels, not harder. And we're thinking about what is the difference between whether two people sit in the proverbial smoke-filled room, shake their hands and agree not to compete, versus building algorithms or AI that will enter into those agreements. And how do we define an agreement in the context of technology? Just as an agreement between shaking hands and over email is still an agreement, if the AI of two businesses agree to fix prices, is it still price fixing? Well, yeah, it is. We have a concept in the United States that often children learn in grade school that if your dog bites somebody, you're responsible for your dog. Just to be very clear, my dog would never bite anybody. He's a very good boy. But I think we're gonna confront very similar kinds of questions with AI. And so if you have AI and it goes and enters into illegal agreements, just like one of your employees, there is responsibility and there is liability. we are also thinking about tools that have sat dormant for decades. Monopolization under United States law can be prosecuted criminally. We brought a case and got a conviction for the first time in 45 years that restores our use of those tools, and we're continuing to investigate and bring other cases. So it's about making sure, as Andrea said, using the tools that we have, making sure we understand them and using them effectively. As for the big technology litigation you mentioned, that matters in active litigation, so I'm going to refrain from making any specific comments, but I will make a few general observations. General observations, not specific to that case, which is, and I think it's in keeping with a lot of the themes that we've discussed here today, is that we have to start making sure that we are meeting the world where it is, not asking the world to meet us where our models have sat for decades. And so as we think about big tech cases, especially ones that are involving some of the biggest, most significant, influential companies the world has ever known, we're thinking not just about static economic analysis. One is we're starting with the facts. We're trying to understand how these facts present themselves. We're trying to be very clear that monopolization today presents itself perhaps differently than it did 50 years ago. History sometimes repeats and sometimes it rhymes. And in the world of modern technology, and often the problem is about building the moat. It's about building reinforcing the core monopoly. It's also about using some of those new tools and disciplines that are now available. Consumers are not predictable along a simple chart. And underlying assumptions that all consumers behave in the same static way is just no longer true. Consumers are idiosyncratic, and consumers can respond to small changes, but in significant ways. And so in our cases, for the first time ever, we're not just bringing experts who understand industrial organizations' economics, but we're calling behavioral economists. We're calling behavioral scientists who can explain why things that might from afar look simple can have outsized significance with respect to impact on how consumers function. And so unwrapping and explaining these in ways that courts can understand, really important part of our work on the big tech front. Also explaining that innovation yield benefits. We need to protect competition for innovation. We need to protect competition to deliver products and services that not just are cheaper, but offer better quality, better security, better privacy. We believe competition can deliver all of those things for all of you.
Todo esto para todos ustedes.
We're running out of time. Fortunately, I won't be able to read out all these questions, but I can see that I anticipated to some of these. I breaking the rules because I just got a message that we have to finish.
Porque me dieron
The heads of agents at COFECE, I really want to hear from you a last message of 1 minute, if that is possible, and then we can just end this session. We are very grateful for all your comments. So we can start now. Matthew.
Hey. Last comments from a Canadian perspective. I think it's clear I'm excited about the trajectory we're on in Canada and the sort of great awakening in Canada across our society about competition. For decades, people have observed that, there's a line from a report from 2008 that Canada has long been known as a country that doesn't place significant emphasis on competition and the organization of its affairs. And we're turning the page on that. We're catching up in international best practices. and we're engaging more in the kind of thinking that Jonathan was talking about how we approach our cases, how we attack the cases in court, presenting, for example, we have a trial about to start where we have behavioral economists explaining to the court how in the digital age companies can, this is a consumer protection case, but intentionally take steps to mislead consumers for their financial benefit. And I think it's, in a way, it's an incredibly exciting time to be in competition. It's also daunting because the world is changing so fast, and we're being called upon to stay up to speed. So exciting but scary.
So competition and antitrust enforcement is the core of any successful economic policy and a cornerstone and essential ingredient to democracy. And if we want and we value democratic ideals, if we value anti-corruption, if we value opportunity for all parts of our economy, that we need to make sure that we invest in competition and antitrust enforcement. Because if it goes away, the consequences will be dire. And the last note I'll mention is that time and again from the public, this is what they want. They want opportunity. They want deconcentration of power. They don't like monopolies. And they want strong antitrust enforcement because it opens up opportunities for all.
Lina, and then Andrea as our host can help it to finish. Lina.
The United States is just at such a critical inflection point. President Biden has charged not just our two agencies with reinvigorating competition, but his entire federal government. It's a whole of government approach to reinvigorating competition, which I think just speaks to its underlying importance to our economy, but also a robust, thriving, secure political system, and really about economic liberty. And I think the other really striking thing about antitrust and anti-monopoly work is that the resistance to our work is baked in, right? Monopolies are powerful. They have access to resources, economic resources, to political resources. And so a lot of times in this work, the kind of, you get a frenzy of pushback because the monopolists don't like anti-monopoly enforcement, right? Somewhat predictably. But I think it's really important to remember the broader public that we serve. And something that both of our agencies have been doing is really opening up public dockets. We get thousands upon thousands upon thousands of comments from people, really lamenting the ways that a lack of competition has hurt them in their day-to-day lives, how much they're paying, how much they're making, but also the freedom that they don't feel in their day-to-day lives because the opportunities are closed off, or they feel that their destiny is subject to the whims of some arbitrary power. And so keeping the broader public importance in mind, I think, is a really critical check and safeguard against a lot of the countervailing pressure that we certainly also encounter, which, again, I think is baked into our agency's history. The FTC was created against the backdrop of robber barons and the Gilded Age, and really created because America understood and recognized that a situation where you concentrate so much power is really antithetical to our most precious ideals.
Punto donde se demostró que la concentración de...
Bueno, pues primero volver a agradecer a nuestro fantástico moderador por este panel y a los presentes y a los que nos acompañaron el día de hoy. Creo que el mensaje con el que me gustaría cerrar es hay conciencia en la labor que tenemos que hacer para lograr impulsar y evolucionar a que la política de competencia no sea solo un motor del crecimiento económico, sino que en nuestro país sea el motor que mueva y contribuya a una economía más justa e incluyente. Y creo que nosotros somos corresponsables de enviar este mensaje de por qué importa la política de competencia, de qué puede hacer la política de competencia para sumar a este fin y de implementar las acciones para que así sea. Muchas gracias.
Gracias a los panelistas. Gracias a la